both along the boundaries, round the existing mill pond and within the centre of the site itself. The majority of trees within the site are to be removed as part of the development proposals. Those on the boundaries are to be retained, and as I'll explain later, the application does include substantial new planting both within the site and to supplement the existing trees on the site boundaries. None of the trees are category A. The site is not within a conservation area, so there's no protection on the trees that are within the site. Following photographs show the trees. These are the poplars that you can see from Old Heath Road on the site boundary. And these photographs show other trees within the boundary and within the site itself. The development is a full planning application for 23 dwellings. It involves the conversion of the existing mill building to a common house, where existing outbuildings are to be demolished. New flats proposed in sort of L-shaped building in this area here, and then a terrace of new dwellings within the site itself. The applicants for this particular development are the London Countryside Co-Housing Group, and their project vision I've explained in the application report. The project vision is to be a cutting-edge example of sustainable design and living. Two essential features of the vision are the low-energy design of the housing units and the environmentally aware travel arrangements, and I'll refer to the travel arrangements later on in the presentation in respect of the proposed parking provision. The site already has an outline planning permission for 23 units, and the red dotted lines on the slide in front of you shows the footprint of the dwellings that currently have approval. As you can see, they are closer to the rear gardens of the houses in Barnhall Road than what's currently proposed, and the proposal is to site all of the units considerably further away from the rear boundaries of the houses in Barnhall Road. This slide shows the mill building, the existing white weatherboarded building that members will have seen on the site visit. There's fairly minimal proposals on the external appearance of the building. Involves replacement windows and doors, all of which have been agreed and are supported by our conservation and listed building officer. There is an existing planning permission to convert the listed mill into a single dwelling, which would have had greater impact on the historic fabric than the current application. Probably the most significant change to the listed building is the proposal to install a lift shaft on the side of the building, but again it's thought by our historic buildings officer that this can have less impact on the historic fabric and try to accommodate a lift within the building itself. This shows the internal layout for the mill building with the guest accommodation on the ground floor and communal dining and lounge area within the upper floors. One of the features of the co-housing group is that residents will have will share meals and other activities two or three times a week, so the mill building lends itself ideally to that purpose. These slides show the proposed flats to the side of the mill building. On the ground floor, there's a range of parking areas and communal storage and refuse and cycle storage, and with flatted accommodation on the upper floors. Shows the garage provision and recycling facilities and cycle parking. And then the flats on the upper floors overlooking an enlarged mill pond. In addition to the flats, the scheme proposes 17 new dwellings, a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units, 2 and 3 stories in height, all of the units will have living green roofs and rendered elevation, a mix of natural render to the elevations with external balconies and areas adjacent overlooking towards Barnhall Road. And again, the 3-storey units. This is the elevation of the new dwellings, as I say, a range of 2 and 3 stories. Some have integral garages. Some units have parking within communal parking areas. There's various sections through the development. Perhaps the most important one is this one that shows the existing properties in Barnhall Road, this position here, and the relationship between the new development and the existing properties. It shows the new development at a much lower level than the houses in Barnhall Road, so in terms of any impact that we know overlooking or overbearing, even though some of the units are 3-storey, and they include living accommodation and balconies at the upper floor levels. These are 3D drawings of the proposed new development. This is looking towards the new flats, and you can see the mill building, the existing industry buildings and Old Heath Road, and again the retained locally listed house looking towards the new terrace of development. This photograph shows the existing mill pond. One of the aspirations of the co-housing group is to have a integrated drainage system and landscape scheme. The proposal involves enlarging the existing mill pond to deal with surface water, and then a range of rills and small water areas to accommodate the surface water from the site. These drawing shows the proposed landscape drawing. In addition to the green roofs, there's planting within the rear terraced garden and around the new enlarged mill pond. And not very good, not very clear, unfortunately, but this does show the proposed planting areas of orchard and the terrace gardens, and then the new landscaping around the pond within the site and along the site boundaries. And a sort of 3D sketch of the proposed site, and again the planting strategy for the development. One of the issues raised by the development is the parking provision, which I've explained within the application report. There's a total of 32 spaces being proposed for the 23 units, but the application does include a detailed transport plan, and again one of the objectives of the co-housing group is shared cars, to have some electric cars to minimise car ownership and travel by car. So on that basis we are agreeable and accepting the parking provision in this particular case, although that is something excuse me, that will be controlled within the legal agreement, that should the particular occupiers cease to occupy these units and it's occupied by residents with, shall we say, more normal car ownership, then we would expect additional parking spaces to be provided. Members will see that a variety of consultees have been consulted, including the Environment Agency and the Highway Authority, and no objections have been raised subject to conditions. We've received a number of representations supporting the application, but you'll have noted that we have also received objection from the owners of the day nursery who occupy the black boarded buildings on the front of the site. And it's obviously the nursery that's submitted the petition that I referred to at the beginning of the presentation. The nursery has two concerns in respect of the application. One is the shared use of the access from Old Heath Road. The proposal is to retain the existing access point, which will be used by both industry traffic and the residential traffic. The Highway Authority has been consulted and they've raised no objection on this particular issue. The industry is also concerned issues to do with rights of way between the nursery and the mill part of the site, and that they have raised concerns about the use and the actual position of the rights of way. As members will be aware, that's not a planning matter, and I think the applicant is fully aware of those issues. This slide obviously shows the existing entrance to the site, and you can see the nursery building to the right-hand side, the black walled building that abuts the road frontage. Members will have seen the parking area when they visited the site earlier this afternoon. If I turn now to the recommendation is that the application should be deferred for a legal agreement. The legal agreement is required to secure the occupancy of the dwellings by the co-housing group. There's a minor amendment on the amendment sheet, which is to allow the co-housing group to be the principal occupants of the dwellings, and that's to allow friends and relatives to occupy the dwellings as well. When the report was drafted, there hadn't been conclusion reached or agreement reached on viability, and that is still the situation. As I set out in the report, the applicants are saying that the scheme would be unviable if they were to pay any Section 106 contributions. We have appointed the District Valuer Service to analyse their viability report, and their initial conclusions have been that the scheme would be viable with a small element of Section 106 contribution, but there has been no final agreement on that particular point. The application, if it was to secure the full amount of Section 106 requirements, it would be a sum of just under £800,000, a considerable proportion of which is to provide off-site affordable housing. The affordable housing officer has agreed that in this particular case it would be appropriate to have an off-site contribution rather than provide affordable housing on site. Obviously, if the district valuer's estimate of viability and affordability was to be agreed, then that would be a sum well below the 800,000. And the development team has taken the view that whatever money there's final agreement in terms of planning gain should go towards providing affordable housing off-site, as that's one of the council's key objectives. So what I'm suggesting is that the recommendation is amended so that officers are given delegated powers that whatever agreement there is on viability, that sum of money should go towards off-site affordable housing. So the recommendation is to defer for that reason to secure the legal agreement, and then a planning permission to be issued subject to conditions. Thank you.
Okay. Can I call Mr. Fergus to speak against, please? Okay. You have 3 minutes and the bell will go at 2.
Hello, my name's Tim Fergus. I'm Director of Butterfly Barnes Day Nursery. Thank you for the opportunity to say my opinion today. We've coexisted with the previous owners of Cannock Mill for quite a while, and the traffic was very low volume, and they did a very small trade and business. And in Maine, the car park was mainly used for our parents dropping off and picking up, so it was very slow speeds, cars basically coming to a halt. And usually our objection is against the access routes that are being proposed by LOCO. We appreciate that eco-homes have to be built, and we haven't got an issue with that, but it's the access arrangements to the site that are giving us concern. We have two main issues with that. The first is the widening of the entrance. First off, we actually are the landowners of that entrance, and we believe legally we have the right to stop it being widened anyway. That said, any increase in traffic we feel coming through that entrance would be a significant risk to our parents and our children. Obviously, if you've seen the car park today, you will notice the car park is very constricted, very small. Often parents will back out into that main entrance. If that entrance is widened and cars can go in and out quite quickly, then sooner or later I'm pretty convinced there'll be an accident. So I don't think it's an appropriate thing to do. Also, I would like to talk, and this is the main issue we have, about the rights that Loco feel they have to go right the way across our car park and access the back of the mill. You will see on some of the pictures that Sue showed on the overhead that they've actually blocked the whole of our car park off as their access route. Now, in reality, we own that land. They do have rights to some access over it, but not the whole area. Obviously, as I've said before, parents currently go into there and they stop at the car park, so it's very safe for the children. The car park is very busy and congested, and parents have been used to doing that for years for dropping their children off. The route that they're proposing to use is very precarious. There's no light vision displays. It's a very tight bend. There's only room for one car, basically. And in my opinion, it is an accident waiting to happen if that becomes a through route rather than just a car park. So basically, I feel that this needs to be considered and something needs to be done about this to stop this happening, especially if they're using electrical vehicles. And basically, they're just trying to use the whole of our car park for their access, which I think is unacceptable, and they shouldn't do that. Finally, I'd like to sum up. I strongly urge you to consider the safety of our staff, parents, and especially our children in any decisions you make on this application. I hope as a director, my comments are sufficient to ensure that the safety of our children is maintained and that they are not exposed to any new risks as a result of a developer's desire to modify a previously acceptable and sensible access arrangement. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you switch the microphone off, please? Thank you. Okay. I now call Mrs. Dawn to speak for.
And Dawn.
Okay, same rules. 3 minutes to speak. The bell will go at 2.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak at the meeting. I would like to, first of all, just say that we do have a right of access over the land to the rear, but the intention is not to use that mainly as a car park, and there's no route through that we intend to use at all to the back of the mill, so I'm not clear what that's regarding. With regard to the scheme in general, it's not a typical scheme. It's not a development which is being done by a developer. It's a self-build scheme. The idea is that the houses are designed to passive house standards and to very high environmental standards. As we have said, one of the reasons that we chose the site was because it actually has very good bus routes. Most of the people involved in the group are older people and want to actually be able to get good access into Colchester and find that Colchester is a fantastic place to live and would really like to move here. The group consists of people who have moved into are hoping to move into Colchester, but we've also had several meetings with local people, and we're very pleased that we now have 3 members, 3 households who are Colchester residents, and we're hoping to recruit some more. We have every regard for the nursery and for the local environment. We want to work peacefully with our neighbours, and we want our neighbours to join in with the scheme. And the intention is that it's an exciting and good place to live for everyone. We have tried to involve people in the ideas for the scheme, and we've had several open days. Approximately 100 people have come along to our open days. We've held meetings with the nursery and hoped that all of these things would make people interested and excited in this scheme coming to Colchester. The scheme follows the landscape of the site and follows the direction of the River Bourne to along the Greenway, and we believe that it will be an enhancement to the area and that a positive contribution to Colchester.
Thank you. If you could just turn the microphone off, please. Thank you. I now call Councillor Havis to speak. Okay, you've got 5 minutes and the bell will go at 4.
The applicants may be a little surprised to see me here this evening, as I'm not here at their request, but of my own volition, because I truly believe in what they hope to achieve with the Cannock Mill site. I've been so impressed by the way they have communicated the ethos behind their plans, not only to me, but to anybody in the neighbourhood who showed an interest. Indeed, they have gone out of their way to lay on events to get their message across. Maybe it's the old hippie in me, but the idea of a community for older people where they support each other, eat together, learn new skills and grow their own fruit and veg is very appealing, as is the premise that they will not all have cars, but have a small pool of vehicles used by the whole community. Likewise, the idea that they'll shop in bulk, again keeping less traffic on the roads. The other thing I really like is the passive house element of the build, which I believe fits in very nicely with Colchester Borough Council's vision in regard to energy conservation, recycling and sustainability. To conclude, I would like to say that I would be very proud to have this development in my ward, and that I hope it's a model that would spread right across the borough, if not the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask Sue Jackson to respond to comments made from...
Thank you, Chairman. I think it might be useful if I perhaps clarify the points made in respect of the route through to the rear of the building. As I explained, the parking provision isn't what we would normally have in terms of 2 spaces per unit plus the visitor spacing. It is quite specific to this particular applicant, and the way they've demonstrated it is acceptable. But we did have a concern that if for whatever reason the group wasn't successful and the site had to be sold on, there could then be a requirement for additional parking spaces to be provided. And what the applicant has done is submitted a drawing that shows a route which takes you past the front of the mill building to the right-hand side to an area of adjacent to the mill pond, which could potentially be used to provide additional parking. And I think it's this area and this access that has given rise to the particular concern from the director of the nursery. I mean, that is simply one option where the parking could be provided should it ever need to be provided. But we thought it was useful to have it demonstrated it was possible to provide those additional spaces. What we're suggesting in the legal agreement is that the new dwellings are occupied by the co-housing group, and if at some time in the future they should cease that occupation and the site is then sold on, that before that happens, that a parking scheme be submitted to us, which would obviously take into account the parking standards at that particular time. And it's quite likely that an alternative parking provision could be available, which wouldn't involve the access across the front of the mill building to the rear of the site. So in terms of the access and the parking that's being proposed and will go ahead if the site gets planning permission is, as the applicant explained, the use of the existing access, which then sweeps away to the left-hand side and up the raised land level between the mill house and the mill building. So that wouldn't involve traffic passing adjacent or in front of the existing car park to the nursery. And a number of the units would have integral garages, and there would be parking spaces within the ground floor of the flatted building, and other areas of open parking for residents and visitors. In terms of the use of the access, the Highway Authority has accepted the use of the access for both the nursery and the residential development, is satisfied with that. I think that probably answers the sort of questions that were raised in terms of the access and the right-of-way. Thank you.
Okay, I will now open this out for the committee. So far I've got 2 speakers, Councillor Sykes and then Councillor Cook.
Chair, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I've no real issues with this development, and it's the second time I've visited this site. I visited it as an outline application. I do have concerns over the colour scheme of the buildings. I would like some discussion about the design, the change of the colour scheme. I'd also like to know, can we condition that garages remain garages and they're not changed in any way at all? Which again, if they are changed into living accommodation, again, that changes the whole street scene here. I don't suppose we can lift development rights, but I will ask it anyway. They're my concerns at the moment, so I'll leave to what others have to say.
Councillor Cook.
Chair, I think the first speaker's raised or set what I would call a seed of discontent. He claims that they own the entrance and the applicants have a right over it. Sue, can you put the map up that shows the entrance from a plan view so we can decide what part of the entrance is owned by whom, because you have a legal dispute here. The plan in the agenda doesn't show the entrance at all. So which part of that entrance does the first speaker can own, and which part of the entrance does the applicants have a right to? Because he's raising a very important question. There are children using it, and if they're going over his property, he has a right to object to them doing so. I think you ought to look at that.
Sue Jackson, would you?
Respond.
Well, my understanding is that from what the director of the nursery said, is that the nursery have ownership rights over the existing access. So, speak up there. Yeah. So as I say, my understanding from what the director of the nursery said is that they own the existing access, and the proposal is to use the existing access over which the applicant has rights of way, both for both vehicles and pedestrians. The proposal is to widen the existing access. I don't think there's any question in terms of land ownership, because the widening is going to take place on land within the applicant's ownership. But it's really a question of whether the nursery has legal rights to prevent that existing access being widened, and their concern is that if it is widened, it's going to allow, as you can see from the arrows on the plan, it's going to allow two-way traffic so that vehicles can actually enter and leave the site at the same time. And it's a concern as to the impact of that on the existing nursery traffic in terms of additional vehicles using the site. I think the Highway Authority has obviously raised no objection to the widening of the access.
Did they know about the dual ownership?
Well, I was just going to go on to explain that, you know, the ownership's not a planning matter. If the and similarly, the right of way is not a planning matter. If the application gets planning permission, which involves the widening of the existing access, and it transpires that the applicant can't secure the land to do that for whatever reason, and obviously they wouldn't be able to implement the planning permission without coming back to us and to yourselves for a modification of the planning permission.
I understand and agree that the access is not, or the ownership of the land is not a planning concern. But the fact that pedestrians and children walk on it most certainly is a planning concern. It is the safety of individuals using the entrance. My view is that there needs to be clarification on the entrance that satisfies both parties and makes the area safe for children to use. That's how I feel about it.
To Jackson, would you like to respond before I resume the discussion?
Well, I think in terms of the safety of the children, the residential traffic, whilst it will be proposing to use the access, won't be passing adjacent to the area where the children play or where the parents and carers park. It will be using the access road and the parking spaces away from the nursery itself. I think in highway terms, it's actually making, the Highway Authority would argue, it's actually making it safer by having a two-way access point so that vehicles can enter and leave at the same time, in terms of vehicles not having to wait on the highway or reverse into the site if vehicles are trying to enter and leave the site at the same time. There is an existing planning permission for the same number of residential units on the site, which proposed a new access point further up Old Heath Road, which again involved two-way traffic. So this isn't really changing that situation at all, other than it's a modification of the existing access rather than proposing a new access. But in terms of the access width, there's no change from the situation that already benefits from permission.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll come to my views on those issues in a minute, but I would like to make the point that we have given an outline approval for this number of houses, so that is a material planning consideration which lies in the background to this application. This is a very interesting one from a planning point of view, in that it isn't a straightforward commercial development. I think Councillor Havis put it very well, that is the type of development which we would like to see more of, because it's so eco-friendly. The people who are going to possibly live here will have a different approach to their lifestyle than perhaps people who would buy it as a normal commercial house. With their interest in lessening traffic, using different modes of transport. These are all things that we as a council are encouraging. And so I think it would be very interesting to see how this develops. The design of the houses is a little contentious, I feel. There are similar houses in other parts of the borough which not everybody's cup of tea, shall we say, but there is, with design of modern housing, there's a lot of opinions, and it comes down to opinion in a lot of these cases. There are design principles, and I believe the scheme has been designed in line with those principles. So I think what we're talking about here is a matter of opinion. Although I would expect some of my colleagues to be a little bit more critical and ask some more questions on the actual colouring. But that is something we can condition if we don't like it. Coming to the thorny issue, I think, of the access, this has been approved by the Highway Authority. It would be very difficult for us, if we like the general scheme, to go against that. I think the nursery are concerned more about the use of their parking area for cars perhaps going to this unidentified area at the back. But this is only a possibility for the future. And if it was to change hands, this application would have to come back because the 106 agreement would fold, or we would be looking at a different type of parking arrangements which would have to come back to committee. So I feel it quite safe to leave that issue. It won't affect the children's safety, I don't think. And as far as the highways are concerned, they're very aware, I'm sure, that children and their parents will use that proposed access, and to make sure that there are enough room for in and out at the same time will stop the possibility of cars having to wait on the carriageway until somebody comes in and out. So I think from a safety point of view, having it in and out like that is probably to everybody's benefit. I'm minded to propose that we accept this, but I would like to hear what other people have to say about the design.
Can I pass over to Simon Cairns, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just really wanted to clarify the point that Councillor Cook raised. I think that Councillor Chillingworth has largely covered it. I think the only point I would like to make is that clearly the Highway Authority were aware of the mix of uses on the site, were aware of the proposed improvements to the geometry of the access, and clearly have no objection on highway safety grounds. So I think officers' recommendation to members would be we have no grounds on which to refuse the application in terms of the safety of the access, having regard to the fact that the Highway Authority have considered this point and raised no objection. Indeed, they appear to suggest that it would be an improved safety would result from the alteration to the access. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Councillor Chillingworth that this is a very interesting site, and I personally have no objection to it, and I would like to see similar ones throughout the borough. My concern is more of a general nature, and I've raised this in the past, and it's regarding affordable housing. Now, I've sat on many planning committees where major applications have come forward, and affordable housing is just not taking place. We have monies that are set aside into a fund, but on many occasions that sum really doesn't equal the proportion that it would be allowed or allocated for that affordable housing. My concern is at the end of the day, when are we going to build these affordable housing, and how do we justify the very small percentage which we are building compared to what we thought technically we were obliged to put into planning application, i.e. 20% of the total. So could officers give us some indication how this money which is being allocated is building up, and how much or how many affordable houses that we could build at some time? Thank you.
Councillor Buston.
Madam Chair, thank you very much indeed. I commend everyone that's spoken in relation to this matter. I think everyone's spoken very well and brought out some very, very important topics. I'm particularly impressed that Councillor Havers off Rainback came and spoke to it, and I think it's a jolly good idea. However, I do have some reservations resulting from the site visit this afternoon. Like Councillor Sykes, I do have some difficulty in relation to the look of the flats at the back. They do seem to have adopted a rather East European approach and design in many ways, and I'm not particularly keen on the flat roofs. They look like a sort of row of garages all put together. I appreciate they've got grass on them, but that's not an issue. And I accept that that is a personal choice item, and it's not up to me to decide. However, my fear is that looking at the colouring and design of them as they are at the moment, and looking at some places elsewhere in our borough, some of the properties that look similar to this look pretty shabby pretty quickly. And I'm concerned that we don't add to that. Until such time as I saw the pictures that Sue Jackson kindly put up for us, I didn't realise that the back development would actually be quite so visible from the road, and that disappoints me a little bit. I suppose it disappoints me in that the other buildings don't carry on the theme of that rather lovely mill building that's there, which is absolutely superb, and I'm very pleased that it's being preserved and kept. However, part of those things can be, if the officers decide necessary, to be conditioned. Second point I was going to come on really takes up from what Councillor Cook was saying. It brings to the fore that there is a complete difference between planning law and the law of property. They are two completely different things, and the planning committee cannot be involved in the law of property. Nonetheless, I believe here there is a significant problem that the applicant is going to face, simply because if the opponent owns the right of way, the applicant cannot force the opponent, if they own the right of way, to increase the usage of the right of way further than it currently is. So they may have some practical difficulty in relation to that, and it slightly becomes a planning issue if it involves safety, and if the access way cannot be widened, because I believe that the highways approval of this, as was pointed out earlier by officers, is predicated on the access way being widened and being made available to two-way traffic, which currently clearly it is not. So the one follows the other, unless the applicant can secure agreement with the school, and then they're going to have a bit of a problem there, I suspect, and that might encroach onto the planning item. Otherwise, I agree with what Councillor Chillingworth and Councillor Jarvis have said. It's a really exciting scheme, and I'd like to see these things elsewhere in Colchester. I think it's jolly good. Thank you.
Before I go back to the planning officer, I just wanted to add about, in the consultations, it mentions the archaeological advisor, and it mentions that a desk-based assessment has been carried out. Can I have confirmation about will there be an actual look before any building will be commenced, and if so, just confirmation and clarification on that. Sue Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, a desk-based study has been carried out in respect of archaeology, and as a result of that, our archaeological specialist is recommending a condition so that actual works on site are carried out as part of the development, and that is one of the conditions that we're recommending. In terms of the the design, and I think the points that Councillor Sykes raised at the beginning of the discussion, the buildings themselves will have a living green roof and will have natural render in a range of sort of earth colours. If members are concerned about, particularly about the colours of the render, then certainly we can strengthen the condition to make that clear, that when that detail is submitted to us, that they're the types of colours that we would be looking to approve. Councillor Sykes also mentioned a couple of other conditions in respect of the garages to remain as garages, so they can't be converted to live-in accommodation. There is a condition that requires that all the garages and parking spaces to remain. And I think thirdly, you were suggesting possibly the removal of permitted development rights. I don't think in this particular case it's necessary. The properties have large areas of communal garden and individual gardens, and I think are sufficiently distant from existing residents for there not to be a requirement to remove permitted development rights. I think any extensions that were carried out as permitted development wouldn't impact on any of the adjacent neighbours, and would also leave large areas of gardens. So I don't think it's necessary in this particular case, although say we are looking to remove rights to convert the garages to living accommodation. I think Councillor Bustin raised queries in respect of the design. I think the approach that's been taken on this particular site is that it was an approach that was agreed as part of the outline, is that the buildings close to the mill building should really be of a traditional form with pitched roofs, which the flatted building have. But the rear of the site, where you've got large areas of trees and grassland, really leads itself to a more contemporary style of dwelling. So I think you can make a distinction between the two parts of the site, which is what the applicant design philosophy involves. I think we're happy, and our listed building specialist is happy, that the two areas of the site do read quite separately, and that the more contemporary design of the dwellings wouldn't have an adverse impact on the setting of the listed building. So I think we're happy with the approach that's been taken. We are recommending conditions not only in respect of materials, but also large-scale drawings for all the features of the building in terms of the windows and the balconies and the overhangs, the porches and that sort of thing. And I think it's those details that will really make the scheme, and they are details that we will have control over as part of the discharge of conditions. Thank you.
Okay, I have three speakers. Councillor McLean.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I didn't get a response to my question.
Affordable housing.
Sorry, Councillor Jarvis, you raised a question in respect of affordable housing.
That's correct, yeah.
I don't think I can give you a response to that this evening, but what I meant to say is that obviously we can take your request away and come back to you and perhaps the Planning Committee with a more detailed report in terms of affordable housing, what has been secured and what financial contributions there are. What will happen on this site, if members agree the resolution, is that any financial contribution will go to off-site affordable housing and will be used to supplement existing affordable housing schemes to provide additional funding for them. I think it's unlikely that any Section 106 monies will be sufficient to allow or to provide a new affordable housing scheme on its own. I think it will be added to it, to the existing pot of financial contributions and used for, to enhance existing sites rather than to provide, standalone affordable housing on its own. But certainly, if you would like us to come back to you at a later date with a, further clarification in respect of numbers of affordable homes that have been achieved, then I'm sure that we'll be able to do that for you.
Thank you, and I would appreciate that.
Before I go back to the speakers, just a secondary question on that matter. Would that be borough-wide or?
If that's the committee's instruction, then certainly we could come back to you with, a breakdown of affordable housing, borough by borough, ward by ward, in terms of what has planning permission and what funds there are available. We could.
Okay, so what will come back will be to sort of, when we look at, if it's brought back to committee, we would see where, because it'll be in the pot, so to speak, would that pot be borough-wide, or would that be?
Yes, I mean, I think what we could do is prepare a separate report to you, separate to obviously the planning applications, similar to what, if we prepare a report, say, on the changes to the scheme of delegation, it could be on that part of the agenda, setting out, borough-wide and by borough, by ward and by parish in terms of affordable housing. So you've got a full overview of what the picture is for the borough in terms of live schemes with permission and other financial contributions.
Okay, Councillor McCain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been a lot of work done on this application, and it's been to us before, and we've agreed outline permission. I think it's been sympathetically looked at and thought out. I think the mill and the adjacent building will work well together with the pitch roof, and I think leading on to the other avenue of housing will be contrasting. It will be modern, it will be different, and I think we're going to just have to accept this, that, you know, it's somebody's idea, they've put it on the table, it ticks all the boxes. So I think it's just unfortunate with the play area being so close to it. I think that's just causing a little bit of contention with everybody because, you know, with the children and with the traffic and everything, there's going to be obviously a fair use of traffic. But there again, with the ecology that's involved, that maybe that there won't be the cars coming in and out. So, and I think with the amended piece here, I would like to propose it as is, please.
Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Tingley. Okay, Councillor Scott.
I was just going to say that I commend the sustainability and the creativity of this scheme. I don't think we should put a lot of additional clauses into it, because that would discourage what is clearly something that we want to encourage, and encourage more often than this one scheme.
Councillor Hayes.
I was going to say that I'm particularly concerned about the potential archaeological remains, and I've been looking through all the proposed conditions for some time, actually trying to find the one which asks for an actual on-site investigation. I'm not sure whether condition 13 on page 38 is quite what I thought we had in mind. You know, I envisaged there would actually be some sort of a trench dug or something to see what remains actually are there, rather than merely a desk-based assessment of the existing records, because we do know this is connected in the past with the ancient priory. So I would like there to be a condition that is slightly beefed up in terms of the archaeological aspect. Turning to the design, I myself don't think of Eastern Europe. I think of Copenhagen and Scandinavia, and I personally found the use of the weatherboarding on part of the new homes as a kind of gesture towards the listed building as rather an attractive thing. In relation to the colours, might I suggest that perhaps since it's in the curtilage of a listed building, there could be some sort of condition that the colours used should be appropriate to the curtilage of the listed building, which in its current form is, I understand, mid-19th century. So there are pigments that existed at that time which didn't include some of the more garish pigments today, and I suspect that some of us may be a bit concerned about the garish pigments. I particularly like the use of a green roof scheme, and I hope that that's also an indication that the applicants want to encourage wildlife, and I'd be particularly interested if there are amphibians in the mill stream and mill pond area, because amphibians are many of them are now endangered. So if I believe, looking through the proposed conditions, there is an assessment, a wildlife assessment required, and I would like to welcome that inclusion. And overall, although I also wanted to comment on what Councillor Buston said about property law and planning law being different.
he's right, of course, but I don't quite agree with what he said about a right-of-way user not being able to increase the amount of use. It all depends on what the right-of-way, how the right-of-way actually is expressed, I think. And I don't think it's for the us as a planning committee to try and second-guess the extent and scope of the right-of-way. But overall, I would say that I think this is a very imaginative and attractive scheme, particularly in terms of its eco-friendliness, and I will be supporting it.
Okay, I have 2 more speakers before I ask Sue Jackson to respond. Councillor Lilly, then Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. We'll start with the pluses first. This is a terrific application, and it's eco-friendly, and it's something that we've been after for a long time. It's not based on car ownership. It's not based on cars. It's perfect for this town. We all complain about the traffic. We complain about all the estates that we give permission to. More and more cars are parked on the street. This is terrific. It's eco-friendly. It's going to be self-built. These people have designed it themselves, so they would have looked at the colours, the design and everything. They're going to have to live in it, and I'm sure that it's not for us to tell them that they should be living in a house, oh, it should be this colour or that colour. It's entirely up to these people. This is an idea. In the 60s, we used to have communes, and people lived how they like to live. Why not? But they've designed it. They're going to live in it. It's terrific. Really is good. The green roofs are something we should be looking at in the future. I'd like to see a few solar panels, but that's another issue. UV lights, I don't know if there's any street lights, but hopefully they are. But Councillor Chillingworth was right. We discussed this 2-3 years ago when it came before us as a material outline. And I think I complained then about the traffic. I use the road every day from Rowhedge. We were concerned about the entrance coming in and out. But in those years, I'm sure that highways would have looked at the accident toll on this road. As far as I know, and the local councillors, there haven't been any accidents of people coming out of that entrance crashing into other people. But what I heard tonight with people reversing out onto the highway, that's actually quite dangerous, and you shouldn't be doing that. There will be accidents. But it's got nothing to do with us, right of way and ownership. We're just here to discuss plan and permission for that. It's entirely up to the owners and the other people to sort out amongst themselves so we can build that. The downside to all is the affordable housing. Like Councillor Jarvis, I've brought this up time and time again. We are suffering from this. It's a bit like deja vu, which I think I said last time. We had the Rowhedge development, no affordable housing. We had the Flagstaff Road development, no affordable housing. It's going to be put elsewhere. We have a policy. We're not sticking to it. Why not? Where are they all being built? Now you just imagine a nice house that's built, an extra house built on here as an affordable house. You've got a young couple with a young child who's living in a one-bedroom flat that was built in the late 50s or the late 60s, has got damp. Now, you put them in a house like this on this site where you teach them about green issues, economy, how we go forward, how we should be going forward. They're going to learn and the children's going to learn. Instead, we're here tonight arguing about a car park and cars. It's not the way forward. We should be supporting more items like this. But the affordable housing, it really needs sorting out, because we don't want to create one big estate where we just dump everybody in who's not going to get proper houses to live in like that, which is terrific. So I will be supporting the application.
Councillor Moore, then Councillor McLean, then I will pass back to the planning officer.
Thank you very much. When we first went on site and we were being shown, the project was being explained, I was very, very positive. I thought, wonderful, how exciting, what a lovely concept. It was only when I saw the design of the row that are up at the back that my heart sank. And I'm not against modern buildings in any way, but I think that they could be so much better. They are going to be seen from the road. They don't fit in with, I don't know if street scene qualifies there, but they will be seen from the road. They don't fit in with anything else that's there. And I say, I'm not against modern building, but these to me look like a motel or blocks, cheap blocks built for army accommodation. They don't, it's a wonderful, wonderful site. And I think that the design of those buildings let it down. Now, I don't know if anything can be done about it, but I was really saddened to see that. They are very similar to some other developments around Colchester, and I look at these other ones quite carefully. They're all weathering very badly. There's water stains. The wood discolours, and not in a nice way. I like wood, but they're not doing well with time. And this is a very important site. I just think those particular buildings let down what otherwise is a superb scheme. The ones at the front, all right, they probably couldn't afford to do that sort of thing going round the back. But I think something better could be done. And everybody else is saying, well, we don't like it, but. And I'm saying I don't like it. And I think something should be done to improve that facade. And I hear what is said about colour, but it's not just the owner. Other people have to look at them. I don't think you can say, oh, paint it whatever colour you like, it's your house. Other people have to look at them, and I think they should be considered in this. I'd like to know, do they comply with Essex Design Guide, or is this just, oh, it's modern, it's imaginative, therefore it must be wonderful? No, imaginative doesn't always mean wonderful. It often means not going to be successful in the long run. Well, that is my comment, and I don't think I can support it. Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
Just to say that if members are minded for me to put a condition on that the officers look at the colouring and the materials, so for the weathering and support what people have said, I'll be quite happy to put that in. But I don't think it needs to come back to committee.
Sue Jackson to go back.
Thank you, Chairman. I think that I've probably already responded to the majority of the points that are raised, but yes, we can certainly beef up the condition in respect of materials that need to be submitted and agreed with us in addition to the colours of the render. I've also been quickly checking through the conditions during the discussion, and I believe that I've omitted to add the condition regarding archaeology, so there will be, with members' agreement, there will be an additional condition in respect of archaeological works. And I think that's probably all the comments I've got to make at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Yes, I would like an answer to my question about whether it complied with the Essex Design Guide.
Sorry, Councillor. In terms of the proportion of the buildings and the garden size and the protection of amenity, yes, the scheme satisfies the Essex Design Guide in terms of the sort of spans of buildings and those sort of details. It's in compliance. Obviously, a lot of the examples given in the Essex Design Guide were at a time when the majority of the development tended to be of a traditional design. So in that respect, it's obviously different to the examples that are set out in the design guide in terms of pitched roofs and brick elevations. But I think probably the design guide does also explain that contemporary designs are appropriate in some circumstances. And I think in this particular case, it's thought that this is a site where the buildings don't necessarily need to reflect the more traditional designs of the housing development around. It's a sort of standalone site, and the contemporary design and materials are reflective of its landscape nature and are supported in this particular case. Thank you.
Committee, we've got a proposal on the table to accept the officer's recommendation to defer and for discussion to take place for section 106, including the conditions for the materials and the colour scheme and for the archaeological survey to be done with those added conditions, and for it to be taken under delegated officer powers. Is that correct? Okay, we'll take a vote on that. All those in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 11 in favour.
Okay.
11 voted in favour, Chairman.
Anyone against?
That's 1 against, Chairman.
Okay, that concludes this item for this application to be deferred, including the conditions in the amendment sheet and the extra conditions we've mentioned, and for it to be decided under delegated officer powers. Okay. Ready? Okay. Okay, now on item 7.3 for 58 Parkwood Avenue, Rivenhome. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you've got to speak into the mic. You're doing all right, you're doing well. Just speak slowly. A lot of them gone now.
Hang on a second. Just get a few minutes. Eleanor Moss to present.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be familiar with this site from their earlier visit this afternoon. 58 Parkwood Avenue. The proposal is for a replacement dwelling. The proposed dwelling is 2-storey detached with a detached garage as well. The application site is with the settlement boundary and also a sustainable area. So you will note from this plan that the application site is quite a substantially sized plot. You will see the existing dwelling in the dotted outline. And the proposed access is via Parkwood Avenue, which leads on from the left. To the east of the site is Elizabeth Cottage, which is a single-storey bungalow, and that also has a detached garage, which almost borders the application site. To the west is 56 Parkwood Avenue, which is a 2-storey 90s dwelling. Members will also note from their site visit earlier that the area is quite an eclectic mix. This slide demonstrates the proposed dwelling in a block plan. As you will see, the dwelling sits in quite comfortably. There's quite a bit of breathing space between either side of the neighbours, and there's also the mean building line, which is dotted on, leading to the left, which sits comfortably inside of that. As you can see, the proposed access leads on from Parkwood Avenue. To the rear of the site, you will see the outline of trees which are protected, therefore will remain the same. There's quite a bit of area to the front, which will allow for soft planting to soften the appearance of the proposed dwelling. This just outlines the protected trees at the rear of the site, which you can see on this plan. Unfortunately, this slide is a little dark, my apologies, but you can see from the slide that the design is very typical, quite a traditional dwelling, and it will fit in readily with the site area. This is the proposed garage, single story, fits in 2 cars. Should have noted earlier that the proposed garage is located where it is. Let's go back. This will allow for a turning circle so cars can enter and exit the site in first gear so that there's no concerns about highway safety. So this slide shows a photograph of the dwelling which is to be replaced there on the left-hand side, and you'll note the trees in the background. Just another picture of the proposed dwelling. The existing dwelling. The proposed dwelling will be stepped back from where this one is. This slide, the photo is a little washy. It demonstrates the access and the footpath which leads to Elizabeth Cottage. To the left, you'll be able to see Elizabeth Cottage there from the street. So this is taken from the rear of the site. This is the rear of 56 Parkwood Avenue, which is the 2-storey detached 90s dwelling. That is the front. This is a photograph of Elizabeth Cottage, the area between the dwelling and their detached garage. This is the front of Elizabeth Cottage. The gap between the garage and Elizabeth Cottage as well. So if I can move on to the offer and recommendation. The recommendation is to approve this with conditions outlined in the report.
Okay, thank you. Can I call Mr. Rains to speak against? Okay, you have 3 minutes to speak and the bell will go at 2.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I'm the owner of the property to the rear of the intended development site, but this evening I speak principally on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Packer, the owners of Elizabeth Cottage, who are unable to be with us. In short, my submission is that this is a very, very handsome development, but it's in the wrong place. And it's in the wrong place for 2 reasons. Firstly, Parkwood Avenue is the wrong setting for a house of this scale and size, and it will, given the juxtaposition with Elizabeth Cottage, completely dwarf and overwhelm what is a very modest bungalow. Wivenhoe Town Council have criticised the proposed development as being overbearing in relation to Elizabeth Cottage, and that's precisely what it is. So for that reason, I would submit that the committee should reject the application. Second, aside from the street, it's in the proposed siting of the dwelling on the plot itself is in the wrong position. And you can see from the plan that's being shown, the intention is to move the footprint of the dwelling very significantly to the rear, and it actually moves into the back garden to the greatest extent. That intrudes on the properties at either side, and there have been objections on behalf of both those neighbouring properties because of that. But the problem is much more significant in relation to Elizabeth Cottage because it has windows which face out of the left-hand side of the property, as we see it on there, in a westerly direction. And so, whilst the report highlights the planning guidance that says there should be a 45-degree aspect to avoid visual intrusion, actually that 45-degree line isn't drawn from the windows. The windows are further north, running close to the garage. And so this property, if the development is allowed, will be immediately in front of the kitchen and the living room windows for Elizabeth Cottage. In view of that, I find it slightly surprising that the report concludes that it meets the guidance, because with respect to my mind, it doesn't. The rearward shift of the property also exacerbates the problem of visual intrusion to our property at the back, where, whilst there are some rather spindly trees remaining, the mature trees have already been removed. There isn't time to go into the various other objections that have been raised, but there are issues regarding a lack of mains drainage for sewage, a flood risk, some significant inaccuracies in the application form, the past history of burning waste in the garden. There are some unanswered questions about asbestos waste, which has been removed, and issues about the increased vehicular traffic on what is quite a quiet cul-de-sac. So, in summary, on the grounds that it is overbearing, I would submit that this should be rejected. Thank you.
Just in time. Thank you. I call Mr. Ravel to speak. Thank you. Same again, 3 minutes with the bell going at 2.
Okay, so firstly I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to visit the site today to gain a better understanding and perspective of the surrounding areas. So further to the notes of recommendation from the Colchester Planning Office, I would like to add the following comments. I would like to start by reiterating that I'm not a developer and intend this to be my family home for many years to come. I last lived in the road 15 years ago and got to know many of the neighbours of our proposed house. Throughout this application, I have always tried to be sympathetic to the neighbours and surroundings. And with the help and guidance of the planning team, I feel that I've now achieved this, so I thank them. This is the third revision of the design where I can demonstrate that I've tried to appease the neighbours and adhere to all of the planning rules in the process. So 56 Parkwood. It can be seen from Mr. and Mrs. Howard's original objection letter dated 20th of May. They were concerned regarding the 4.2 metre rear protrusion of the proposed property. Further to discussions with Mr. Howard, it was agreed to move the house forward by 1.5 metres, reducing the rear protrusion to 2.7 metres and therefore the distance from the front boundary from 10 metres to 8.5. You will see from the revised plan overlaid onto the topographical survey, the 2.7 and the 8.5 metres have been achieved as agreed. Elizabeth Cottage. In response to Mr. and Mrs. Packer's objections, which can be seen on their letter dated the 22nd of May, over the revisions it can be seen that I have changed the roof line from a gable end to an easterly facing hip. I've also reduced the garage to a single storey and separated it from the property to soften the appearance of the dwelling and remove any possible overshadowing. The proposed plan shows for the first 8 metres or 25 foot, we plan on building a single storey garage, and that our house will be built 12.5 metres, 41 foot away from their bungalow. I have had an asbestos R&D survey performed. All asbestos on the site has been tested and found out to be grey chrysotile, the least dangerous kind. All asbestos that was outside is still outside. All asbestos that is inside is still inside. No asbestos has been removed from site. This is not the largest house in the street to be granted planning permission within the last 2 years. Number 24 is a 6-bed dwelling with smaller houses surrounding it. The new houses on the corner of Parkwood Avenue have just been built right next to a bungalow. It's been suggested that the plot would support 2 houses. Surely this would create more objections regarding overdevelopment, overshadowing, parking and traffic concerns. And I've also then got two letters from local residents suggesting that they are in support of this application rather than then having 2 developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks for that. I call Councillor Scott to speak. Okay, you have 5 minutes and the bell will go at 4.
Thank you. I'm going to read something from the people in 56 rather. We have no objection in principle to the building of a new property adjacent to our own, but we do object to the position of the property on the site relative to our own. The applicant claims that the building has been repositioned 1.8 metres nearer the northern boundary. This is not the case. Using their own submitted scale drawings as part of their application, the amount the building has been repositioned is only 400 millimetres further north. Repositioning of the proposed property about 900 millimetres further north would then align the element to the main facade closest to our own house with the building line and reduce the amount that the property extends past our own to the rear of 6 foot rather than 9 foot. This minor repositioning would still give ample space for vehicle access and turning space. Any agreed positioning should be from a fixed and known dating point. This repositioning would also go some way to meeting objections raised by at least 2 other residents. In summary, they would ask that in the event that the Planning Committee grants planning permission for the proposed development, it is subject to the condition requiring the adjacent facade of the proposed dwelling to be aligned with the front of the building at 56 Parkwood Avenue. So there's a problem of alignment, and they have approached the owner of the plot, and they're not satisfied with what's been changed. I'd also like to speak on behalf of the residents in Elizabeth Cottage and mention that this is an exceptionally large house. That if you look at the rest of the road, yes, it's mixed, yes, it's both bungalows and double-storey, but if you look at the house next door, which you visited today, that house, which it seems large compared to its surroundings, is a fraction of the size of the proposed house. So in terms of being overbearing, it's staggeringly overbearing. And in terms of the small cottage next to it, there's no doubt at all that it overshadows it in a way which is very striking. The other thing I'd like to point out is that footpath or track that goes in front of the house, it goes all the way out to the high street. So it's more than just a footpath in front of the house when you're considering how it may intrude on that corner, which is a feature of the lane there. So, first of all, I suggest that we specifically make sure that the alignment which has been offered actually is on the plan to satisfy the one neighbour, but then I think we ought to look very carefully at the size and overbearing nature of the plan altogether. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave. Okay. I call the Eleanor Moss to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the positioning, certainly it can be something that can be conditioned, but obviously it's up for members to decide if they want to pursue this route. It is a very minor amendment, and the repositioning would not have any effect really on 56 Parkwood Avenue. Moving it ever so slightly, there's been no impact at all. With regards to the windows on Elizabeth Cottage, you saw the side-facing windows today. Obviously, these would be facing onto the single-storey garage, which is positioned sufficiently away from the boundary, and also, as noted earlier, the proposed dwelling is some 12 metres away from Elizabeth Cottage, so the overbearing impact would be minimal. It's not unusual to have a mix of development, and it certainly isn't unusual to find older developments next to newer developments which are of varying sizes and styles. Earlier a note was raised regarding burning. This is something that can also be conditioned. Thank you.
Okay, I open this up to the committee. Councillor Buston.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Chair. I was delighted to have the opportunity to look at the site this afternoon. It's a very big site. I think a number of folk were a little surprised that it wasn't being divided into a number of units. So that will probably benefit the area that it isn't. I note also in paragraph 10.2 of the report that yet again there appears to be an access problem, but again that's not a planning consideration, but it looks like there's going to be a lot of work for lawyers. My only concern really about the site was the positioning of the garage apropos Elizabeth Cottage, whereas I don't think it would infringe any planning any planning position. Personally, I would have liked to have seen the garage actually positioned further forward to be aligned as far as possible with the existing garage of Elizabeth Cottage. I think that would have helped considerably. But I suspect we're not going to be able to do that. Otherwise, I can see no objection to this at all. I think it's a good design. I think it looks nice.
Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I think it was very useful, our site visit this afternoon. Not only did we go on the site, we went into each of the neighbouring properties as well. This is a large site. Councillor Buston is quite right. It could be divided and probably acceptable from a planning point of view. I see no overbearing in planning terms. I know that the neighbours see it that way, but we're looking at material planning considerations and any harm which is being done to amenity. And I don't think there is any. I can't see any material planning considerations that we should take into account which would make us refuse this. I would therefore like to propose that we accept the recommendation as it stands. That's my proposal.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jarvis. Okay. Eleanor Moss to respond to the comments.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the repositioning of the garage, if it was moved ever so slightly forwards to be in the building line, it could impact on a turning circle. At least with it being positioned this way, it will alleviate some of the road parking, hopefully. And as you can see, there's a lot of room on site which exceeds the car parking standards. I know there have been objections regarding parking on the street being impacted, but this is a problem which is already occurring, and I wouldn't suspect this would increase any additional traffic, which is significant. Thank you.
I have no other speakers for this item, so I suggest that we take a vote on the proposal, that we accept the officer's recommendations. Do I have... Any those voting in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Is that 11? Yes, I'm missing somebody. Councillor Scott is out of the room, so that's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we voted in favour of the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to 7.4, and if Richard Collins could go through the application, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Evening, members. This application is for a loft conversion, which includes a dormer window, single dormer window, and roof lights in the roof form. Before you is the existing elevations. You can see it's quite a high-pitched roof. You've got the existing front elevation down here, equally rear elevation and two side elevations. You can see from the location plan here that the property itself is situated towards the kind of rear of barn fields in a kind of cul-de-sac formation. Existing floor plans, which I'll just scoot through. And the proposal, as I mentioned, is for a dormer window on the side here, which includes a window which is to be obscure glazed and fixed shut, and 2 roof lights on that elevation. On the opposite side elevation, you have 2 further roof lights and a single bedroom window on the front elevation here. The design in itself has gone through a few design amendments. There was a window at the rear elevation up here which has been removed, and some of the roof lights have been removed, as well as the roof lights have been extended further up the roof plane to ensure that they're at a height of 1.7 metres above the finished floor level. That's the proposed loft area, the second floor to the proposal. As you can see on the frontage of the site, which is here, would be the bedroom area, and then to the rear of the property you have the dressing room, which forms then into the ensuite area. And you can see from there that the dormer window is going to kind of locate the stairwell to that second floor. So photographs of the property. So that's the elevation which would have the dormer window, which would be looking towards number 5. Similarly, the front elevation with number 7 in this location here. That's the elevation, side elevation, where the dormer would be looking towards number 5 in its rear garden. That's taken from the rear of the application property towards number 7. This is a front elevation photograph showing number 7 to the side, and a particular concern of the objector next door is regarding this side elevation window here. And lastly, a photograph just showing the visual amenity issue, really. This is, I can't remember which number that one is, but the application property is through... It's not going to let me do it. Through here is where the cul-de-sac area to the application site is to the rear of the kind of cul-de-sac area. So as you can see from the report itself, there's 2 main issues really. One is to do with visual amenity, and it's considered by officers that the impact of the development won't have an adverse impact on the visual amenity area. And given the design change that we've received, there won't be a significant adverse impact on residential amenity of the neighbours. The recommendation is one of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Mr. Oliver Howe? Right, you've got 3 minutes, and the bell will ring at 2 to remind you got a minute left.
Good evening. I'm Oliver Howe. I'm the occupier owner of number 7 Barnfields. I'm mainly sitting here this evening, obviously, over objections with regards to a side window in my premises. The window in question is actually an 8-year-old child's window. If you look out of that window and directly upwards, you've got clear sight of the roof and the proposed area where the dormer window is going to be placed. It's my understanding that these windows are clear and opening. Obviously, the purpose of a dormer window is that it's merely an angled window. It doesn't prevent you looking out of it. Anybody over the height of 1.7 metres would easily be able to see out of it, especially when one of these windows is opened. With regard to those photographs, in one of them you can quite clearly see that the pitch and angle of number 6 Barnfield's roof is quite steep. Okay, and if you were to look out of that dormer window directly down, the line would fall below the side window of my daughter's room. Thereby, there's a clear, unobstructed view into her window. Obviously, my concern is now that that view is there, it will be there in the future, and it's something that hasn't, in my opinion, been addressed. However, I've risen the same objection 3 times in relation to that. Objection in relation to privacy with the rear garden was acknowledged. This, however, has been overlooked on 3 times now. Obviously, quite visibly there, you can see obviously the buildings in that number in Barnfields are only 12 in total. They're built specifically to be as least intrusive to each other as they can be, whereby windows tend to look at side of houses, houses are staggered and offset to each other. This is correct with our neighbour's house. The window that we have looking out that side looks onto a blank side of the house where there are no existing windows, and that was something that was designed in when the properties were built in 1999 and 2000. My objection has been mirrored by the Hydes, who can't be here this evening, of number 2 Barnfields. They actually live in a property which faces out onto London Road and have asked to express their concerns in relation to the same roof lights. By virtue of these windows being clear and opening, the access and vision can be had across the rear gardens of all properties that they look towards. Upon purchasing that property, I was only too aware that obviously we moved into an area where there is permitted development. There are strict rules on satellite dishes and such like being placed onto properties, which is why my concern now is obviously greatly increased, that obviously now a 3rd story is being added to properties where there are only premises with 2 stories. The only development that's undertaken are conservatories or single story, which have little or no impact on neighbouring properties because of fence lines.
Thank you. Can I call on Jason Hall, please?
Thank you. I'm Jason Hall. I'm the resident of 6 Barnfields. We've been a resident in Barnfields for nearly 12 years. Having been successful in finding an alternative property to move to in Stanway area early this year, we made the decision to extend our current property to gain the space needed for our growing family needs. After very careful consideration, we came to the conclusion that the only viable option for extension on our property was to convert the loft. Several of the existing 4-bedroom properties in Barnfields were designed and built with a dormer-style window and roof lights, and it was this design that we set out to replicate to ensure any of our roof alterations would be in keeping with the surrounding area. Following the neighbour consultation, we did not receive any relevant objections regarding the dormer and roof lights proposed on the east side facing roof of our property. Objections raised by residents at number 7 Barnfields regarding loss of privacy from proposed roof lights on the west side roof facing the side of their house and garden were taken into account by us, and our plans were amended by 1. Reducing the number of roof lights from 4 to 2, 2. Reducing the size of the roof lights, and 3. Moving the roof lights higher to ensure that any opening parts are permitted development level 1.7 metres above finished floor level. All changes made to help protect privacy. Let me state that all our roof lights are purely for light and ventilation purposes only and are not designed to look out of. We understand the reason for calling us to this committee hearing today is due to our neighbours' belief that the forward position roof light on the west side will enable loss of privacy via their small side bedroom window. After reviewing this and consulting with our architect, we have come here today to contend that this is not the case. The proposed roof light does not, as stated by residents at number 7, sit almost perfectly opposite their side bedroom window. Opposite the window in question is the side wall of our house. They also state that the roof light has direct line of sight into their side window. This, we believe, is also unfounded. To explain, firstly, we would like to highlight this is a small, narrow side window facing directly opposite the side of our house, not our roof or any proposed roof lights. Secondly, in our opinion, due to the far greater height of our roof light in relation to their window and the short distance between our 2 properties, the extreme oblique angle created between the 2 windows will not make it possible to look directly into the window and infringe on our neighbours' privacy, something that we do not wish to do. Having reasonably taken into account our neighbours' other privacy concerns, we cannot see that their claim with regard to this window are founded, particularly as this window is already visible at ground level and can be seen by anyone passing by. One other objection raised that we'd like to address relates to access difficulties and displacement of vehicles whilst the project is underway. We have ensured that our chosen contractor will not use a skip, choosing to trailer away all waste on a daily basis, thus not blocking our ample driveway for our or the contractor's use. At times when several tradesmen may be on site, one of our other neighbours has formally offered to use their driveway during the day, therefore minimising any inconvenience to the other 2 neighbours in the cul-de-sac. We would like to thank the committee for their time today.
Thank you. Now I'd like to call on Councillor Scott Buttel. You apparently have got 5 minutes.
I appreciate that the applicant has been willing to compromise by removing the roof light in the proposed dressing room and for the dormer window to be fixed and obscure glazed. However, I have a couple of concerns. Overlooking. 15.8 in the report states the roof lights are to be sited a minimum of 1.7 metres above the finished floor level. I queried this having visited number 7 and looking at the front bedroom side window. You do not see just brick, as the neighbouring property's roof line is lower and you see the roof slope of the applicant's house. I fear that it would be possible to look out the roof light into the bedroom of number 7. Could a condition be imposed for the roof light to be fixed and obscure glazed so the bedroom is not overlooked? This is not the only source of light in the proposed bedroom, as there are windows to the front of the property. This roof light would be having a direct impact on neighbours' amenity as the buildings are in close proximity of each other. Permitted development rights. When Barnfields was built, permitted development rights were removed, as acknowledged in the report. This includes additions such as dormer windows and roof lights as to safeguard visual amenity. I wish to flag up to the committee concerns about the unity of this development, as the removing the development rights would compromise the unity of the location. As the committee is aware that when the property is sold on, the new owner has to apply for permission to change this condition. This undermines the strength of applying the removal of development rights condition and would therefore set a precedent for others to follow suit. What are the committee's views on this? I understand the reasoning behind the application as families expand and it is cost effective for them to change their house to fit in with their needs and lifestyle. It is important that we get this right because once it's there, it's there. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Could the officer please respond?
Thank you. I'll just take you back to the proposed drawings. Okay, what we have here is the main concern being the roof lights in this elevation here. Now, there's 2 roof lights there, and if I take you to the floor plan, primarily this window here, and its location in proximity to the neighbour here. So if I take you to the photograph of one of the main concerns, it's number 7 window here, which the owner of number 7 mentioned is his daughter's bedroom, I believe. You can see the roof form of the application property, roughly a 50-degree pitch to that. Now, the design changes have gone through various stages, and as mentioned in the report, it has been noted that those roof lights now are going to be set at 1.7 metres above the finished floor level, which is what the general permitted development order would allow you to do. So if the property had its full permitted development rights, being on a side elevation, you could certainly have a an opening and non-obscure glazed roof light at 1.7 metres. Reason for the general permitted development order and the caveats that go with it is to ensure that development can occur without making a formal application to the planning authority, but still protect the residential amenity of neighbours. So that's why in this instance, myself as the planning officer, when visiting the site, was concerned about the number of roof lights and their position, because that was going to have an overlooking issue of the neighbouring properties. So that's why we ensured that the design changes came forward to ensure that it was 1.7 metres above that finished floor level. There's been comments with regards to condition potentially for at least one of those roof lights to be non-opening and obscure glaze, which again I think Councillor Scott Patel was referring to this window here, and I'll leave that to members to debate really as to whether or not they feel that is particularly necessary if they were minded to approve the development. Lastly, the development, when approved, did have permitted development rights removed for quite a lot of development, to be honest with you, which included outbuildings like sheds, for example, but also even repainting the dwellings themselves would need express planning permission from us. Now, the application before you, it doesn't remove that condition. That condition is still there even if you were to grant planning permission this evening. It just means that the council will still contain control. Therefore, if anybody else in the cul-de-sac wished to come forward with roof lights or dormer windows, you as a council would still have control over how that would be developed. It wouldn't be a watering down of any conditions. It would still be under your control and for future applications to come before the planning committee if necessary. Thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Sykes.
Thank you. Well, we know how difficult it is to get property in Stanway, and going upwards is obviously a good idea. I have no concerns over this extension upwards. It's obscured glazed, and I can't see the effect it will have on amenity. I think we've had applications here where I would dispute some of the applications that have been passed because it has had adverse effect on neighbours. This I don't see as having any bad effects. Where we say it sets a precedent, we've got to look at this application and nothing else. This is what's on the table. And anything that comes before us in this area, we need to look at that. It's an individual project. Regarding comments about blocking roads and scaffolding, we all have to put up with some inconvenience when people are working on their properties. And it's give and take, and you work alongside your neighbours. Regarding my views on this, I would like to propose recommendation with the conditions in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chillingworth.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with Councillor Sykes, except the neighbour is obviously concerned about his daughter's situation, and the officer has offered a condition to, I think, make the offending roof light double glazed and unopening. It seems to me as a belt and braces exercise, it would be good for us as a committee to put that condition on. Other than that, I'm perfectly happy with the proposal and I would second it. Sorry, did you propose it? Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes.
Unless my ears are deceiving me, I think Councillor Chillingworth said that the dormer condition would be that it be double glazed and non-opening. I suggest it should be changed to obscure glazed and non-opening, and I would suggest that that would be a way of dealing with the neighbour's valid concerns about his daughter.
Yeah, Councillor Chillingworth.
Sorry, I obviously meant obscure glazed, not double glazed. But we're not talking about the dormer here, are we? We're talking about the roof light.
Councillor Cook.
No, Chair, the Councillor Chillingworth and Councillor Hayes have said exactly what I think. You could put an obscure glass in the windows.
Right. We got a proposal from Councillor Sykes and second by Councillor Chillingworth.
Chairman, Councillor Sykes' proposal was without the condition about the obscured glazing. So you're accepting the proposal? Yeah.
Right. Would you like to come back?
Yes, if I could be, if I could just be clear before we take it to the vote. The dormer window has already got a condition proposed to be obscure glazed and non-opening. And what members are, just so we're clear, it's this roof light here, which is the one is almost aligned with the bedroom window here. It's that window, just to be clear, members are requesting an additional condition on to be obscure glazed and non-opening. Thank you.
Chair, I would suggest both of those windows, not just one.
Right. Now, the proposal that's been put forward by Councillor Sykes and seconded by Councillor Chillingworth is for one window. Are you suggesting two windows doing the same?
It was stated by the applicant that he needed the windows for ventilation and there was a light. Now, restricted vision glass would let both of those things in, and I think it should happen on both windows so there's no opportunity to look into the window of the girl's bedroom. That's my view on it.
Right. You are proposing for the two windows. Right. Any seconder on that? Councillor Hayes.
If we're going to condition the middle window here, I mean, effectively all that window is looking out on is, I'm not sure if I've got the greatest photo, is that kind of chimney breast, the gable end. Again, for it to be conditioned, it needs to have a reason for it. And I would suggest that that window in itself isn't to be obscure. If it's obscure glazed and non-opening, it needs to be on a residential amenity issue. From that window, I would suggest all it's looking out on is the gable end and the chimney breast, so it's not got direct views into that potential bedroom window. So I think, down to members again, but the main concern, as I understand it, is that one window rather than two.
Yeah, I think the planning officer will know better than I, but I can't imagine why you need to have one, not two. What's wrong with two? Windows that are restricted glazing.
Well, I think the planning officer has given the good reasons as to why it's not two. Right. We have got two proposals. The first proposal, Councillor Sykes, proposed and seconded by Councillor Chillingworth, with one roof lights obscured. Right. So all. Yes. Yeah. Right. So all those in favour.
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in favour.
Right. The second proposal is not...
Chairman, could we invite the councillors to vote against that proposal first?
Right. All those against then.
Looking for me to vote against it. There's nothing wrong with it. I was just trying to improve on it.
That's one, Chairman. That's 10 in favour of the proposal for one roof light, and the committee has voted in favour of that proposal.
Thank you.
Committee, there's only one item left. Are we happy to continue? Yeah. Okay, then. Item 7.5, James Ryan to present.
Evening Chair, evening members. This is two-storey rear extension and a basement in 27 Eleanor Road. Members will be familiar with the site because we went there earlier today. That's the existing elevations as we saw. Existing floor plan on the ground floor and the existing basement. Little existing block plan there as well. That's the proposal, so really looking at that bit there. Being pulled out from the rear elevation, as we saw on site. So that's the existing rear. So effectively pulling virtually an identical elevation further out in that direction there. Extra bit of decking, slight increase on the balcony, utilising the change in levels. Proposed side window on the ground floor to the kitchen that the report notes. Proposed bathroom window in the side, annotated as being obscured. Oh dear. Oh, crikey. Sorry. Drawing showing the existing first floor plan and the proposed first floor. Front elevation as we saw today, side elevation, so that's the elevation where there's the full two-storey extension is going to be pulled out. Shown from an angle, showing the neighbour, the adjoining neighbour, or the neighbour that has objected to the, in that area there. Existing rear elevation and existing deck. Shown as an angle with the juxtaposition with the neighbour there. As we saw, the neighbour sits at a slightly higher level. This is a photo actually taken from the neighbour's patio, so looking across the site. And that's the view you get of the applicant sitting out area from the neighbour's patio. That's facing the other direction, which I did point out on site, which is the neighbour's other neighbour, so which had been previously allowed a two-storey extension. I'll go back to the that one there. So, I mean, as set out in the report, we approved this identical scheme in 2009. The applicants weren't able to commence it, so they are reapplying using identical set of plans. In 2009, it was felt to be entirely acceptable in terms of its impact on amenity and design, and it's felt that there's been no material change in circumstance since then to warrant a refusal this time. It's felt that although usually we'd require a two-storey extension to show a degree of subservience, in this instance because it's a slightly peculiar, almost arts and craftsy dwelling, they've extended, pulling the whole elevation out without the level of degree of subservience, maintaining the roof line, maintaining the kind of low eaves, or the way that the eaves drop down slightly, seems to be a sensible way of achieving what the applicants want to. And as I said before, as we previously accepted it, there doesn't appear to be any reason to not accept it this time. There's been no material change in circumstance or planning policy to refuse it this time, and therefore the officer recommendation is for an approval. Thank you very much.
Can I call Mr. Keane to speak, please? Three minutes to speak and the bell will go at 2. 3 minutes to speak and the bell will go at 2.
Thank you for your time. Since we put in the objections, the case officer visited our home In our brief discussions, he appeared to totally understand our concerns. Having read the report, we remain disappointed and feel strongly that our concerns have not been fully considered and would ask the committee to fully review this conditional approval. The main rationale in support of the recommendations, certainly on the basis that it's mentioned 7 times in the report, is a previous consent given in August 2010. As we raised in our objection email dated the 15th of June, the August 2010 consent referred to in the report was actually a renewal of a submission dated June 2004, and at that time we were not contacted by the council or given the opportunity to comment. Please note we moved into number 25 in July 2007, and I have been informed that as this was a renewal, that notifications would not have been sent. I would ask for clarity on this point, as either the system has failed or needs a rethink, as it appears far from reasonable that newly affected neighbours in such circumstances are not considered or consulted. The footprint of our home and garden has changed significantly since we moved in July 2007, and we feel it's unreasonable and unjust for this not to be taken into account. Basically, the plans under consideration were originally submitted in excess of 11 years ago, which was prior to us residing at number 25. More importantly, the report states that regard should be given to a number of adopted supplementary planning documents. However, the report then goes on to disregard such. The scheme fails one of these tests for overbearing contained on page 8 of the SDP guide and only passes the other one very marginally, as noted in points 15.6 and 15.9 of the report. The crucial point to note is the area referred to at our home has undergone material changes as approved by this committee to convert the garage to a kitchen, dining, living room space, and the submitted proposals will in fact have a material impact on the use of that indoor and outdoor space. The report states that the 2010 consent is more relevant, but to reiterate, we were not aware or contacted about this extension or planning permission. And when the original permission was given in 2004, the affected space was in fact a garage and not the main hub of our family home. We therefore feel the conclusion of the report is inaccurate, as there has indeed been material changes to our property since the original scheme was approved, which is the point that requires further investigation and review. Please give this objection your full consideration, as we strongly believe the proposals put forward will adversely affect our family home. And I would invite you to view the matters on site from our perspective, like you have done other schemes today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sorry. Can I call Mr. North to speak?
It's all right, he's coming.
You have 3 minutes to speak and the bell will go at 2.
Good evening. The first thing I'd like to address you on is why we didn't pursue the extension back in 2010. Basically, we had a number of family crises. My wife suffered serious ill health, had heart surgery, was hospitalised on a number of occasions. We sadly lost 3 of our parents through long-term terminal illnesses, so the extension was not our priority. If I turn to Mr. and Mrs. Keynes, Hazel and Herbie's written objections, I have to say with great respect that it's wholly misleading to write that our understanding was that it was renewed back in November 2009 and we had no opportunity to comment. The reality is that in 2008, Mr. and Mrs. Keynes spoke to us about their wish to extend to see whether we had an objection. We didn't, but I took the opportunity to tell them that we planned to revise the plan permission from 2004 because we didn't need a side extension, which would have been closer to that boundary. They were pleased to hear that. In 2009, I took the plans to them and to our other neighbours. Nobody had any objections. My recollection is that they actually received a letter from planning because they told us that they had, but that's a record that I can't prove. But in any event, it suggested the situation is now different from 2009. It is not. If you look at the 2009 plans, you'll see that Mr. and Mrs. Keynes' extension is clearly shown there. With regard to the patio, had you had the opportunity to stand on it, you've been surprised how high above the fence you would come. It's been raised artificially by a height of 3 foot. As you've seen from the photograph, you can look directly across into our garden and into our kitchen. We never raised an objection about privacy. I assume that that was built like that to take account of the fact that we were going to be building our extension. With regard to loss of privacy, as you'll have seen today on site, one of the things that you have when you live in Ellinor Road is that you're overlooked by your neighbours. We already overlook from our existing windows. The new extension won't make any difference there. In respect of overshadowing and loss of light, that's a technical matter which has been considered now by two of your planning officers. Neither one of them saw an issue. As you'll have seen, though, that along Ellinor Road, even with the extension, if granted, we will still have a relatively modest-sized house. We're seeking the same amenities as other properties have. We have a very small kitchen. It's unsuitable for our family. Same amenities that Mr and Mrs Keane have as a result of their extension. I'm not going to address you on the potential impact of groundwork because that's a building regulation matter, but obviously we have fully insured builders. I would like to end by making this point. We relied to our detriment on the understanding that we reached with Mr and Mrs Keane in 2008 and 2009. Had they ever indicated to us that they were having a change of heart after they constructed their extension, we would have moved hell and high water to put the groundworks in. With respect, this is an opportunistic objection, which puts us at a considerable disadvantage. But we're not seeking a massive extension here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask James Ryan to comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. I did clarify the issue of the previous extension and the time when that was made and approved, and I could actually just double check today because of some questions that were raised on site, and I've got a photo in front of me that we actually date stamped upon receiving on the 3rd of November 2009, which shows the situation identical to how it is today. So the 2009 application, which was approved in April 2010, was approved on the basis of the situation we can see on site today. If there had been a material change, well, clearly there had been a material change between 2004 and 2009. The previous officer, and it was dealt with under delegated powers because no objection was received. The officer took that into consideration and considered the scheme to be acceptable, hence why the report does refer to the previous consent 7 times, as was pointed out to you. It's referred on so many occasions because it is fundamentally important to the determination of this application. We don't see there's been any material change in circumstance, and on that basis, the application is acceptable.
Okay. Councillor Baston.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. As I was asked and required to call the matter in by a resident, that I indeed did, and you can see the result of that before you, as noted in the officer's report. I've said before the committee, the calling in of an application doesn't necessarily mean that the councillor is in support or otherwise of the call-in. It is something that needs to be submitted, particularly if the councillor is going to sit on the planning committee. As a result of that, I will not take part in the discussion, and I will absent myself from the room. Thank you.
Okay, committee, I open this to you. Councillor Chingworth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's disappointing when proposals like this result in disagreement between neighbours, and I hope no worse. However, we are here to look at the planning situation. There is a material planning consideration in that a permission exactly the same as this was approved in, what was it, 12? And it could have gone ahead. It didn't for various reasons. And as has been pointed out by the officer, there are no changes in circumstance, either in the neighbour's property or in planning policies. We have the opportunity, because it's come for us, to look at to see if there are any harm being done by this. Obviously, any extension that extends beyond the neighbour's rear building line is going to be some amenity problem to him. But is there harm? I can see no harm. So, again, we are looking at it fairly, and I propose that we accept the recommendation with the conditions. Thank you.
Do I have a seconder for that, Councillor McLean? Joe Hayes, Councillor Hayes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to point out, first of all, in paragraph 3.1 of the report, that the dwelling in question is not on the corner of Fitzwalter Road. It is on the corner of Fitzwilliam Road. As I was born in Lexton, so I know. What concerns me, well, there are two things that concern me. One is that the side of the plot is a very long plot, and basically the back garden is the front of Fitzwilliam Road. So in effect, this extension is going to be highly visible. And I just think it's such a shame that such an attractive house with attractive rear windows and a sort of harmonious use of the design features is going to be, the shape of it is going to be altered if it is to proceed, then I think it's the loss of a rather attractive shaped house. But the other thing I wanted to raise was the suggestion that the neighbour had not been notified by the planning authority in 2004. And since this is not the first time that I have heard of neighbours not being notified, I would like to flag up my concerns that it really is, I feel, an essential part of the democratic process to make sure that interested persons are notified, and I'm concerned here that that didn't happen, or that it may not have happened. And the third concern I have is that we do have these, forget the technical word, but these principles that you apply to decide whether a proposal is overbearing in terms of light or just sort of frowning over the next door garden. And in this instance, it actually fails one of those tests. And yet it's then said, I mean, if it had passed both the tests, then we would be saying there is no ground at all to, sustainable ground to object, so therefore it just goes flying through. But here it actually fails one of the tests, and yet it's not treated with rigour. We're not saying it's. I mean, if you have a rule, then it seems a bit pointless always to be in favour of development, and that does concern me. But my main wish really is for direction on really whether it is really determinative that there was a previous permission, and to what extent do we have a discretion to depart from a previous permission which is in the same or substantially the same terms.
James Ryan to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll respond to those in order, no problem. In terms of the design, I think as I set out in the report and in the presentation a little bit earlier, usually we would expect a degree of subservience between the existing and the proposed. That kind of intentionally hasn't happened here in order to create a kind of composition that the plansmith who drew the plans, the applicants, and I think officers agree still works, still retains the charm of the existing dwelling. It hasn't obliterated that, or it's far from being a monstrosity, even though it doesn't show that degree of subservience that we'd usually look for. I appreciate the comment you make about, or Councillor Hayes made about the way that we run down the road, and that does make that elevation quite prominent. But I don't think it's prominent to the point of being demonstrably harmful to the street scene. We're not located in the, it's a very nice part of the world, but we're not located in the conservation area. It's a design that respects the original, and in that regard, we consider it to be acceptable. With regards to the consultation of neighbours, the 2009 determined in 2010 application was a full planning application, so the neighbour should have been consulted. There seems to be some concern as to whether they were or weren't, but the fact of the matter is, regardless of whether they, I think they were, but regardless of whether they were or weren't, the decision was made. The decision was not challenged at the time, and it is a material planning consideration that we approved it. I think an inspector would want to see a change in policy to sustain a refusal on the grounds of design or on the grounds of overbearing nature, as set out to justify why it was acceptable in the relatively recent past. It's not like it was in the 80s and things have moved on. I couldn't point you to any design guidance that has changed. That would be the issue. In terms of the point you make about the 45-degree test, as I pointed out on site from the corner of the neighbouring property, as I said on site, we're being absolutely honest with you, it does fail that test. It failed that test in 2010 when the previous one was determined. It's not a rule, it is part of our adopted guidance, and therefore, for example, it doesn't form part of one of the tests in the Essex Design Guide. It's just in our own extending your house SPG, so it's adopted guidance. It's in many ways becoming less and less relevant because of the changes to permitted development rights that have come forward since this application was previously approved. So we're finding that we are approving more and more extensions that do fail that test. In this instance, there are material considerations that outweigh that test because, as set out in the report, you've got a change in the land. You've got that very quite slack, kind of almost cat-slidey element of roof here. So that brings the eave down lower than on the other side, which will reduce the impact of that scheme from the neighbour's window, which is there, and their sitting out area, which is here. So on balance, officers consider the scheme to be acceptable in that regard, even though it does fail the 45-degree line from the taken from the corner of the property. So we don't see that this scheme is refusable and then sustainable at appeal, hence the recommendation. Thanks very much.
Okay, I have no more speakers and a proposal to accept the officer's recommendations subject to the conditions in the report. Can I have those in favour?
Chairman, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in favour.
Okay, so we've accepted that the officer's recommendation subject to the conditions. And now I now declare that the meeting is now closed.